out and was really helpful. Like he stood in one position and he was like, keep bringing the nose forward, keep bringing the nose forward. Okay, now turn as hard as you can. The whole boat started shoving to one side. So the back of the boat came very close to impacting on the right. So I'm like, brace for impact.
Yeah, and I was like with George and I was like,
Okay, we're recording.
Sorry about the bad
lighting. We're kind of stuck in a position where it's directly to the side of us, and if we try and get the camera any more so that you can see behind us to the lock, then we're going to be completely black.
The lock being Keadby lock above the Tidal Trent.
Yeah.
So today's the day. We've been on this mooring for 3 weeks, which was fine to start with, but then we were really ready to go.
Yeah.
And we're definitely ready to go now, although I'd much rather be getting the train, obviously.
Yeah, you kind of sail right past that 2-week limit thing when you're forced to by the fact that there's a flood. So
yeah, and 2 storms, and so we've just been sitting here.
Yeah, through Storm Ziara and Storm Dennis and Storm whatever the heck the next thing was. There wasn't a storm. And
today's not the ideal flood to be tide to be going on.
No, there is a fairly large amount of water coming down from above.
From upstream.
From upstream, yeah. So it's in kind of semi-flood conditions.
Yeah, there's a lot of fresh water coming down.
Yeah. Not so bad that he says we can't, the lockkeeper says we can't make it to
West Stockwith.
Is it West Stockwith? Yes, West Stockwith today, but we're going to be pushing against the tide we're going to be pushing against the river most of the way. The tide isn't going to help us that much. So he said we can wait roughly 2 weeks and go up with a heavy tide that will push us all the way, or we can push against the water.
But in 2 weeks we're going to be in Canada, so,
yeah. So we've elected to push against the water.
Michael has.
I have, yes. Yeah. There's not much to it. There's, on a good day with tide behind you, there's roughly 2 hours of travel, about how many miles?
13
miles. On a day like today, it will take quite a bit longer, but hopefully we make it.
Yeah, I think we don't go backwards.
Yeah. Because if for whatever reason we arrive when the floodgates are closed at West Stockwith, we have to continue down to Gainsborough and then turn around the next day. Most likely we'll make it with plenty of time though, because it's 9 o'clock, 9:20, and we should be just heading out there in about 10 minutes. And yeah. Anything else? You looking forward to it?
No.
No. Okay.
I don't think we explained it very well at the beginning of the vlog. Basically, the Upper Trent has been in flood for weeks, and therefore it's been closed to boats. We only want to go as far as the Chesterfield Canal at West Stockwith, and so not as far as the flooded section, but as there's so much water upstream it'll be pushing against us as we travel south, even though in theory we're travelling with the tide. We've had 3 weeks on this mooring in Keadby, waiting for the lockkeeper to give us permission to travel. It's been okay. It's not the nicest mooring. It's felt a little industrial, and the road to the car park isn't ideal, but there are showers and facilities, and on the whole it hasn't been too bad. Yesterday we arranged with the lockkeeper for the best time for us to travel, so it's on with the life jackets and we're on our way. I'm more than a little anxious to be going out on the tidal river, whereas Michael is completely relaxed about the whole thing. On the plus side, we have some beautiful weather for the journey. The lock is already open for us, so the lockkeeper just needs to close the road and swing the bridge that's in front of the lock to let us in. There's the bridge shutting behind us. And then the lock gates get closed. The lockkeeper opens the sluices and we begin the descent to the River Trent. We get a glimpse of the mighty river through the gates as we go down. The There's a fair bit of water coming over the lock gates from the canal above us. And then the gates are opened and we're off. The water is completely flat, but you can already see that the flow we're going to be pushing against. We wave to the lockkeeper and the round tower, and then it's a few more revs on the engine as we emerge onto the river. The river is incredibly wide here, and Michael's having to increase the power to get us moving. We're using an old guide from the Boating Association to help us navigate the river. For the most part, we just need to keep in the centre of the channel, but there are some sandbanks that we need to avoid. Although, as Michael keeps pointing out to me, the water is so high at the moment that we probably don't really need to worry about them. The River Trent is tidal from Cromwell Lock in Newark to the Yorkshire Ouse and Humber Estuary at Trent Falls. Today we're travelling between Keadby and West Stockwith. After Newark, the non-tidal Trent is navigable as far as Shadlow. In fact, we cruised on it from Shadlow to the Erewash Canal in 2017. The Trent itself is 150 miles long, and it's strange to think how close we've come to it so many times before. Looking east, you can already see how fast the water from upstream is pushing against us as we make our way south. On the opposite bank to Keadby is the village of Dunnes. There's still a wharf here that was once used to load iron ore onto boats. It's definitely still in use. This cargo ship seems to travel all around Europe, although I couldn't find any details of what's loaded here now. The first obstacle is Keadby Bridge. It was originally called King George V Bridge, and it's over 100 years old. It carries the double-track train line to Scunthorpe and road traffic on the A18, and we've crossed it many times during our stay in Keadby. Our guidebook says we need to pass under the lifting span, which is the section to the left. And here's a better view of the bridge, looking back without the sun in our eyes. And this is pretty much our view for the next few hours. It's pretty cold and windy, but the river's wide and flat and the sun is shining, and it's very exhilarating to be out on this expanse of water after being cooped up on the boat in Keadby for the last 3 weeks. We're now passing the villages of Birmingham to the west and Althorpe to the east. This is St Oswald's Church in Althorpe, which is one of the few buildings that can be seen from the river. And that's St John the Baptist Church in Birmingham, although you can't really see it properly. We have been on the river for about 2 miles now. There's a little hamlet here called Derry Thorpe, and there are some mooring dolphins. They're for commercial traffic only and not for narrowboats, which is just as well, as George probably couldn't climb the ladder there anyway. The bridge ahead of us is for the M180, and it's actually the second and last bridge that we're going to pass under today. If you want to cross from one side of the Trent to the other, there aren't many options. There's 8 metres headroom under here, so we should have plenty of room, even though we left the chimney up again. We've travelled about 3.5 miles and the river is narrowing slightly as we head upstream. That can only mean the flow of water against us is going to get stronger. This is West Butterwick. There's an old mill on the banks of the river here, just north of the village. And that is East Butterwick. The twin villages are just across the river from each other, but to get from one to the other it's a 7-mile trip by road. This whole area is known as the Isle of Axholme, the name Isle given as it's surrounded by 3 rivers, the Don, the Idle and the Trent. It was a wetland that would flood every winter, and before that an ancient forest heath and marsh. The Isle was drained in the 17th century, leading to the area to become incredibly fertile for farming. This is Botsford Beck, a fast-flowing stream that drains into the Trent. And then here are some more of those commercial mooring dolphins. This is one of the tidal gauges on the river used to measure the height of the water. This rather lovely old building in Austin Ferry says W. Glendale and Sons Corn Merchants. I think it's now been converted into a house. And I just have to comment once more about how hard the water's pushing against us. We can see some flood defences built along the riverbank to protect the villagers. On the opposite bank to Austin Ferry is East Ferry. And here's another old mill. Apparently this one's been converted into a rather grand house with its own helipad. We are making very slow progress with the sheer volume of water heading downstream, and the river is noticeably narrower now. It's still pretty exhilarating to be out on the river, but bear in mind we've been sat on the back of the boat for coming up to 3 hours now, and since we lost the sunshine, the March weather has been biting. We are now passing the village of Wildsworth. We've been travelling for about 10 miles so far, and so we're on the home straight. If you're wondering where I am, I'm actually sat on the deck board at the back. It's really cold, and this way I can keep Michael company and stay out of the wind. I'm missing the scenery, but in all honesty, there isn't an awful lot to see, and Michael was kind enough to shout out if he spotted anything interesting. We pass Scunthorpe, and from here I call ahead to speak to the lockkeeper at West Stockwith. He is expecting us, but I want to give him an update on our location. He gives me some advice about the turn into the lock, essentially involving travelling slightly beyond the lock entrance and then making a hard turn. We're finally on the outskirts of West Stockwith and are creeping towards the lock entrance. This is the River Idle. Michael did have thoughts of looking into whether we could cruise up there, as it's officially navigable. However, there's a huge flood barrier across the entrance. The whole of the 13-mile journey from Keadby has been pretty uneventful, and now for the hairy part. I'm pretty nervous about the turn, mainly because of the speed of the water flowing against us. As we make the turn, we'll quickly lose momentum and will start to be pushed sideways. The lockkeeper has already got the gates open, and he's out on the bank to help direct us in. Michael makes the turn like a pro, and I hide on the floor with George. The time-lapse footage doesn't do it justice, but it's pretty scary for a moment. Here it is from the rear camera. I'm sorry I didn't film anything else. I was far too stressed. I'm so relieved to be in the safety of the lock and on the Chesterfield Canal. George and I jump ashore, happy to have our feet back on firm ground. The lockkeeper is really friendly and welcoming, and he directs us onto a visitor mooring in the basin. We're alive!
Yep, and we are finally, after almost 2 months, off the Stainforth and Keadby Canal.
It's only like a few miles long.
Yeah, it's like a tiny canal, and yeah, we came up from past Barnaby Dun.
Oh, right at the beginning of the year, like on
Right
the
in the early January. So
2 months.
basically, we've been
2 months.
2 months between Thorn and Keadby.
We've done more miles this morning than we've had done in 2 months.
Yeah, it's crazy. This is the slowest we've been the entire time.
So we're finally.
To be fair,
Yeah.
the weather and the flooding and like Mother Nature was keeping us in one place. Like,
Yeah.
you know, the only thing we could have done is turned back and gone back to, you know, like basically we could have gone back and revisited places we've already been, like
yeah.
Castlefield and stuff.
And it suited us to slow down. We were going to slow down anyway, but not quite that much.
No, it wasn't intentional. But so, after a significant amount of time on the Stainforth and Keadby Canal, we are finally off the Stainforth and Keadby Canal. We are on new waters.
Very exciting. We're in Chesterfield.
Yeah.
We're on the Chesterfield Canal in the basin at West Stockwith.
And I'm looking forward to trying out some of the pubs in West Stockwith.
Except they don't serve. We arrived and got the boat moored and just got settled in, and then I phoned the pub, and they were like, I said, do you serve food? Yes. Do you allow dogs? Yes. We stopped serving food in 1 minute.
We're not going to make it in 1 minute. Bastards.
Can I order?
Yeah.
So it took us 3.5 hours from Keadby Lock, or I think it's pronounced Keadby Lock to West Stockwith Lock, and it should take 1 hour and 45 minutes. So.
Because typically you'll make that trip, you will time it so that you leave as the tide's coming up.
You basically ride the tide.
You ride the tide all the way up.
But we were pushing the floodwater that was coming down.
And there's a lot of floodwater coming down. So
Honestly.
basically there was no tide. Essentially we were just...
When we pulled in, and it's now raining, when we pulled in and I looked back out at the river, I was like, if I'd seen that before we'd gone, I would have been like,
us go.
no.
Yeah.
So how was it?
I mean, it was great. Like, it was, yeah, I mean, it's a very wide river, very flat, no, you know, like no waves or anything like that.
No, it was really flat.
There was a couple of bridges where you have to make sure you go through, you know, one particular arch, and so it's extremely useful to have the guidebook. But beyond that,
we had the guidebook which showed where all the sandbanks were. Now, bear in mind, the floodwater is coming out, so the river's like 2 meters higher than it should be. I still made Michael stick to the red line.
Yeah.
And avoid the
She's like,
flood.
make sure you don't go anywhere near the ground. And I'm like, I'm not going to ground out. There is a boat and a half between me and the normal amount of...
So he was quite annoyed at me, but I still had to point it out every time.
Yeah.
And
But for the most part, it was quite placid. It was very pretty.
yeah,
You know, it wasn't quite as like...
there was a few points of interest. Like there was a few villages that we went
Yeah,
past
and there's
stuff.
there's a couple of old windmills that are decommissioned, and
Yeah,
the
mills.
villages we passed through were a little bit different because they have sort of a Dutch architecture to them.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, well, you were cowering in the bottom, making
was
sure we
cold.
didn't hit the bottom. But basically, yeah, it's a nice stretch. It's normally done in about an hour and a half. It took us 3 hours.
It's normally done an hour and 45 minutes. It took us 3.5 hours.
Yeah, something like that. It's normally done in an hour and 45 minutes. It took us 3.5 hours. Great, excellent. So we got that covered. But yeah, it was, the water coming down was in no way, you know, it didn't cause any currents. There wasn't anything that was more difficult. It was just that we slowed down a lot from what you would be able to make
That's
in
the only
terms of
issue.
time.
And then turning into West Stockwith.
Yeah, that was fun.
That was hairy.
Yeah.
I didn't look.
That was we just passed the River Isle entrance, where there is a EA controlled sluice that allows you through if you want to navigate up the River Idle. I asked Jim, the guy at the lock, you know, can you do that? And he's like, well, it's 120 pounds to open it, 120 pounds to open it coming back, and there's about 200 meters. Yeah, no, okay, fine. We won't be doing that one. But yeah, so then immediately past that, maybe, I don't know, 300 yards past the entrance to the River Idle is the entrance to the Chesterfield Canal, where there is the Stockwith Lock. And it's like a 90-degree turn you have to make. And he came out and was really helpful. Like he stood in one position and he was like, keep bringing the nose forward, keep bringing the nose forward. Okay, now turn as hard as you can. And it's like, okay, I'm turning as hard as I can, but it's not like I really have that much acceleration.
And
so the nose came over. Yeah, you dived down. The nose came over fine, but then the back of the boat, the whole boat started shoving to one side. So the back of the boat came very close to impacting on the right. So I'm like, brace for impact.
Yeah,
But then at the last second, I was able to pull
I
it.
couldn't hear you over the engine. And like, so like, you kept saying things. And I'm like, I can't hear you. Should I be worried?
When I yell brace for impact, be a little worried.
No, you didn't say that. You said there's going to be a bang.
Okay, well, so
And I was like with George and I was like,
it would have been a bang.
oh, it's
But then
really
we were just
raining.
straight into the lock. Right.
Thanks for watching. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit the bell if you want to get notifications, and comment down below. Bye.
See you later. It'll be fine.
Awake at 2 a.m. having nightmares about how to get into the lock, so no, definitely not.
They'll open it for us.
No, not this one, the other one. So if I'm worried about getting into this lock.
Right. It'll be fine. Okay, we good? We're going. We're on that way. We're in that direction.